Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I am joined by Rainier. Rainier, how are you?
I am good. New year, new me. Happy New Year, everyone. I think I missed you guys on the last one.
There you go. Yes, Happy New Year. We are joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how's it going?
How's it? It's going well. Happy New Year, everyone.
Excellent. And rounding out the group, Porfirio Rangel. Porfirio, how goes?
It's going good, Henry. Happy to be here with all you guys. Happy New Year.
Excellent. All right, let's dive right in. Today's topic is Hawkeye. So we're a little bit late to the game here. This show is actually done for about a month or so. So we've had some time to process a bit, and we can get our collective thoughts on the most recent Marvel Studios Disney Plus TV show. Real quick, the Comic Sauce Podcast is on social media. Catch us at Comic Sauce Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Today is January 21st, 2022. And indeed, we're going to talk some Hawkeye. So Hawkeye wrapped up a really big year for Marvel Studios. There was the most MCU content in a calendar year of all time in 2021, right? And this wrapped it up. So I'm kind of curious with all of you all about expectations. What were your expectations going in? We had seen a lot of MCU content on TV, at the movies, different formats. We got a lot. So what were we feeling here? Were we kind of Marvel fatigued out? Were we ready for more? What was the feel going in here? How about Christian? What do you think? Let's start with you.
All right. So going in, let's see into Hawkeye. Yeah, I think like this one was kind of being overshadowed as far as like MCU content by Spider-Man: No Way Home. I think I was feeling a bit, fatigued out. I think at that point, which did kind of I think play into how I felt about the show. But I did enjoy the trailer. I will say that it was fun. It was Christmassy, and like it had everyone's favorite Avenger.
I sense a little sarcasm there.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm sure there are some people in this world who love Hawkeye, and he is actually their favorite Avenger. But yeah, I know what you mean. Tends to be a little less favored than others. All right, how about Rainier? What were your expectations going in on this one?
My expectations were, I think, the same Marvel expectations that I normally have. They set the bar, fairly high for anything that's MCU related, and the audience has an expectation of that. And yeah, I think it's different than, I think it's got some level of differentiation compared to some of the other Disney Plus MCU series. I particularly enjoyed it, actually. Not unlike Christian, sorry, I wasn't fatigued by this one. I actually kind of put it at the top of my list, actually, of all the stuff that was on Disney Plus. I can get into that more later, but yeah, my expectation was the standard MCU expectation, and it was there for me.
Nice. How about you, Porfirio?
Yeah, I think I To be honest, I think I had Hawkeye like pretty much under my radar. I wasn't looking forward to it or anything, but I was just like, it's right there. I'll watch it because obviously it's Marvel, and yeah, I don't think I would use the word fatigue, but just um something I wasn't excited for, and the trailer didn't help. It was very like fun, and just felt like, yeah, just watch another Marvel piece. But um, I think because I had like no expectation for it, I had a really, really great time with it, and it definitely surprised me and was probably one of my favorite shows of the year.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Yeah, that is interesting. We talk about expectation a lot, but that can factor in quite a bit on how things actually turn out, because when you don't expect a lot, you can be really pleasantly surprised. So for me, I think I was looking forward to this one. And I think we keep bringing up the trailer, but yeah, I was kind of hyped on the trailer. Like if I hadn't seen that trailer, I probably wouldn't have been that excited. But after I saw the trailer, I'm like, well, this looks pretty good. And I was really looking forward to it. The trailer made it seem like it was a really light, heartwarming show for the holiday season. And that's kind of exactly what we got, right? And yeah, to echo the positivity about the show going around the room here, yeah, I had a really nice, warm and fuzzy feeling after watching this season. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about the show itself. 6 episodes. We've all watched them all. And now that it's over and done with, what do we think? What did we like about Hawkeye? It sounds like a number of us liked it quite a bit. How about specifics? What in particular did we like? What do you guys think?
I'll go first. So I think one thing I did really like about Hawkeye, even though I made a sarcastic comment about like the favorite Avenger, I thought they gave Clint Barton like a pretty good arc and a pretty good story. I like where he starts out at the beginning, how he's seeing the wonderful play about about Captain America in the first Avengers movie, and he has like a hearing aid from all the explosions. Like you see him in like a battle damaged state, an older, more broken man. And like I think he has a good arc to um like him, like kind of training his protege, Kate Bishop, played by Haley Steinfeld, um, to like kind of the end where he gets more and more involved in the plot, and you kind of see kind of like a much brighter side of Hawkeye kind of come out a little more and more throughout the series. And then I really liked, I guess we'll get into spoilers already. So I'm just gonna
Oh,
throw out that warning
spoiler
now.
alert.
Spoiler alert.
Warning.
I thought the ending that he had with Yelena, where they were talking about the death of Black Widow, was like a really wonderful scene, and I think I really liked every kind of scene that he was specifically in.
Yeah, cool. Jeremy Renner is the main character of the show, and yeah, like a lot kind of weighed on him, and I thought he was great. I thought he was excellent on the show. He's very likable. Like the main driving force of the show, isn't saving the world. It isn't even like uh training Kate Bishop, or fighting the tracksuit mafia. It's simply Clinton Barton trying to get home for Christmas, right? And that's so great. It's such a relatable kind of thing, right? He's a superhero, but he's doing the ultimate like everyman thing. He's just trying to get home, right? So I love that. And yeah, I had that as a positive too. Clint Barton, like the character of Clint Barton played well again by Jeremy Renner. And it's kind of cool, like with Hawkeye, you don't get to see him a whole lot in the movies. He has to share screen time with a lot of other more popular heroes. But here, he finally gets to have some screen time, and yeah, it's worthwhile for sure.
For me, I think one of the biggest positive, which Christian brought up, was Yelena. Like every scene she was in, I was laughing just like Black Widow. I think like for me, she was like the star of the show again. Like Disney should just give her own movie or TV show or her own project. Like I would watch it over and over again. Like from the moment she was first introduced again, fighting Hawkeye, to like the awkward macaroni confrontation with Kate Bishop. I just loved everything that she had and delivered. Yeah, to me, she was like the biggest standout for why I enjoyed the show.
Yeah, I'd totally be on board with a Yelena show or movie. Definitely. What about you, Rainier? Any particular highlights for you?
Yeah, going back to what you said, Henry, about like the simplicity of like this is just a guy that's trying to get back home to his family for Christmas, I think speaks to what I was thinking about the show, is that it's got like this ground level charm to it. Like it's not incredibly splashy. I mean, I don't think we see any superpowers in this show. Like, it's all about like the human element, and I think that's what was really capturing of the show. Like, and then the relationship that builds between between Kate Bishop and Clint Barton, I think is really cool to see flourish and open up. But what's also interesting too is we're also seeing New York like post incident, post Thanos, and you're seeing the effects of how it is on people, especially Clint, like with the hearing aid he's wearing. Like he's just a guy, and like, yeah, being caught up in all these explosions amidst all the other Avengers, like it's going to take its toll. And portraying that he has that level of like PTSD watching like Rogers the musical, it brings a really like human element to it. I think it kind of brings like the whole Avengers thing like back down to earth so that we can relate to it a bit more. It's interesting how it's become like very self-aware. Like, he sees people in costume, like wearing like an Iron Man costume or a Captain America costume, and even like the Rogers the musical thing is very interesting. It's just like the show has become very self-aware. But yeah, it's got a lot of great elements. And the thing that Christian touched upon that I really enjoyed too was his closure that he was able to provide for himself, speaking to Yelena about Black Widow. It's interesting seeing him like revisit that and really express what he, like what he felt. Like we certainly saw it in Endgame, or sorry, in Infinity War. But to have him like elaborate more on that, like I think it helped provide closure to what he was actually experiencing. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, good takes. And yeah, that's always been part of the Clinton Barton character. He's always felt like he's not really he's out of his league in a lot of ways, right? I think there's a line in the first Avengers movie where he and Natasha are like, we're dealing with gods and monsters here, like what can we do? And now she's gone, right? So he probably feels like, oh, I'm just like out of my depth here.
He reiterates that in Age of Ultron, where he's like, I'm just a guy with bow and arrows, I think he was saying that to Wanda, I think.
Yeah.
And it's like I feel like that connects to the audience really closely, because like if we were there, what the heck would we do?
Yeah. So yeah, good point. And they kind of continued that feel into this show where he's maybe got a little imposter syndrome or something, where he just doesn't quite feel like he belongs with that group, and he's just more of a regular type guy.
I do love too the action sequences are great. I mean, there's so many cool things you could do with a bow and arrow, and I think they were able to capture that in this series. Like we don't see a ton of that, like where he is in the other movies. I mean, trick arrows. I mean, come on, like it was all in there. It was great.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Pimtech
yeah.
arrows.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the action scenes are really cool in this show. There's one in particular I really loved. It's the car chase.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
great
and they're
In
scene.
trying
episode
out
3.
all these different trick arrows.
It's one
It's
continuous shot too, I
yeah, it's
believe.
so cool. It's so cool. And you know, you get to see Clint and Kate kind of working together, and there's a lot of comedy in the scene, and it's just visually really impressive. So yeah, that one really stood out. But yeah, overall the action is great.
Speaking of which, that one continuous scene, I feel like that was a foreshadow call to um having Wilson Fisk pop out. Because if you remember in Daredevil, they did a lot of those action sequences where they were like all one continuous shot. And it just seemed so appropriate that like Wilson Fisk shows up at the end, you know?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
maybe there's something to that.
And we get Wilson Fisk, like he's
Yeah.
tied into this. So it was a great show. I really liked it. Um, as Porfirio was saying, like it's at the top of the list for me for the Disney Plus series.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. But here's a little devil's advocate. So yeah, I enjoyed the show a lot. I enjoyed it, the groundedness of it, and I enjoyed the action scenes. But here's the thing though, like in a show that does take, you know, a more realistic approach to the characters, like there are no superpowers, there's a lot of relatability going on. How do you wedge in heroes with bows and arrows, right? Like in reality, a bow and arrow is never going to be superior to a gun, right? So I think there has to be a leap of faith here where you kind of have to be just like, okay, just go with it. You kind of have to believe that they're so great with bows and arrows that they can defeat criminals with guns, right? I don't know. It just seems to be a little bit counter to this relatability aspect, right? Any thoughts there? Like, did you guys have problems with bow and arrow heroes beating dudes with guns?
It doesn't matter what you have, it's how you use it.
Nice one. I like that.
No,
Though
yeah.
to speak to
No,
that
go
point
ahead.
though, I think the one thing that stuck out in the show was like there were scenes where like Kate Bishop's like walking down the streets of New York with like a straight up like, you know, bow and arrow and quiver and all that stuff. And it's just like that wouldn't catch anyone's eye. Like although I think they do speak to that where they show like the groups of LARPers that kind of run around all over New York City. But yeah, that struck me as a little odd, but that's it.
Porfirio, did you have something there?
Yeah, I was just gonna agree with what you guys said. Like, yeah, like there's Kate Bishop who just walks around with her bow and arrow, like I think like to the store or something. And it's just like, okay, this is totally normal. But then like, yeah, like it's just so funny that you bring up that like Hawkeye and Kate Bishop just like bring up a bow and arrow to like a gunfight. Like there was that whole scene in I think the last episode when they're like in the middle of the ice skating rink and they're like shooting
Yeah.
the bad guys all around them. It's just like legit, like if anybody had like a gun, like any of the bad guys had a gun, they could have just shot them from like afar, and there's
Yep.
the end of the show. Like, but
Yep.
no, they had to go and try to tackle them or something, and it's just ridiculous and fun. But I think that plays into the spirit of Hawkeye, where it's just like yeah, like what Rainier said about like, you know, how he's like, I just have a bow and arrow and this doesn't make sense, but let's just go with it and have fun with it.
Yeah, you bring up that season finale, episode 6, and that's where I think they went a little too far, because up to that point, like I could handle it, like the way they used the bows and arrows. Like I was like, okay, it didn't get so ridiculous that, you know, it just didn't seem right until that last episode. There was that big battle at the Christmas tree. And it was fun, but it was just really silly. And it really took it too far, I think. Like we've been saying, there's this whole holiday feel with the show, and I think it gives us some buffer. It allows us to accept some exaggeration, but yeah, sometimes I think they maybe push the envelope a little bit too much.
No, man, I think you guys are underestimating how well a proficient person with a bow and arrow could really be. Because I mean, someone that's like not very good with a gun compared to someone that's like very proficient with a bow and arrow. I mean, and it's not just like an open shot, right? Like they created the environment, right? Didn't they provide mist or smoke or something like that to provide cover?
It could happen. Right?
You still don't believe it.
It could happen. Look at the characters too. Like, from what we know of Clint Barton, this guy has extraordinary hand-eye coordination, right? He's talked to Tony Stark about how he always shoots holes in ones when he plays golf, right? He never misses. And what we've seen his work right on the battlefield. Like he doesn't miss. So maybe you can like sort of go off of that and just be like, okay, this guy is just a special person. He has extraordinary abilities. With Kate Bishop though, like they did get into her background a bit, where she was really driven at an early age, and she became a fencer and an archer, and she trained like her whole life. So there is some believability about her skills, but like, I mean, some of the stuff she was doing just seemed pretty outlandish, like too much maybe, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's an MCU show. Come on, it's
well, okay,
everything's
so
outlandish.
Yeah. Well, look. I mean, I think if it were a certain type of MCU show or a movie, I might feel differently. But it was very lighthearted. It was comedic. If the tone of the show was like, I don't know, like Captain America: Winter Soldier, that'd be different, right? Then when you bring in this like unrealistic abilities and stuff, then it's like, what the hell, man? That doesn't seem right. But like the vibe of the show was such that you could kind of accept these exaggerations, I think. So that's why ultimately I'm saying like I was okay with almost all of it. But I think it needed to be stated that, archer heroes are it's a tough pill to swallow to see them so proficient at taking out like dudes with guns, right?
I was looking at for me, I was looking at like the bigger picture, because it's not just them like at a range like shooting at targets. Like there's the environment they were in. They can also fight too, right? Like there's the hand-to-hand combat aspect of what they were doing and the physicality of how they were moving. So like for me, it was the whole picture. That's why it seemed like it made sense.
Cool.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It kind of reminds me of something of like a quote I've heard somewhere, where it's like audiences will believe the impossible but not the improbable, you know? Where you'll believe that an alien comes down and gets 6 Infinity Stones and snaps away the universe. You're like, yeah, I'm on board with that. Yeah, a teenage boy flies around New York with shooting spider webs out of his hands. Sure, why not? But I see what you mean, Henry, where you mentioned how it feels a little improbable with a bow versus like a horde of gunmen towards the end.
Yeah.
But you gotta look at these gunmen too, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's the name of their company? The Bro, what is it?
Yeah.
They weren't the sharpest tools in the shed. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Wasn't they called like the tracksuits or
The
something like that?
Tracksuit Mafia.
So the Tracksuit Mafia. What was the name of their moving company? It was like Trust a Bro or something like that.
Something like that. I forget.
I mean, anyone that works for a company called Trust a Bro, come on. Are they gonna hit their target every time with a gun?
But yeah, Christian, you bring up a good point. Like a lot of the logic issues, it boils down to, does what you're seeing fit into the logic of the world you've created, right? So this world, is a bit of an exaggeration on things. This is not a documentary about crime, right? It is a world where superheroes with bows and arrows can defeat, powerful villains. I think there's a point where it does get a little ridiculous, though. So I think we're kind of seeping into getting into some of the negatives now. So maybe we can start talking about some of the negatives now.
Wait, Henry. Wait,
Yeah. Go ahead.
One last positive I want to
Go
give
ahead.
up with before we move on to the negative stuff is just the character dynamics. I think that we've talked about, like, there was just really good like interaction and vibes between like just not like the heroes, but also like the secondary characters. Like there were just a lot of great characters. Like there was Echo, there was what's his name, Jack, the
Oh, yeah.
swordsman.
Jack, yes.
Jack, the mother. There was just a lot of great like dialogue and chemistry between like the characters, and I just really had to point that out because I don't think I cared so much about like a cast than I have with like the previous Disney Plus programs.
Gotcha. Yeah, actually, that brings up another thought before we get into the negatives, and because we haven't talked about Kate Bishop a whole lot. She is definitely a main character in the show, and I remember when we were giving our like initial takes, I recall some of you being a little bit down on Kate Bishop, about her being kind of annoying. So now that the show is done, maybe we can kind of get our takes there. Real quick on my end, I really enjoyed the Kate Bishop character. She's a lot of fun on the show, and she has a pretty cool character arc. And the banter between Barton and Bishop, I thought was great. And there's great chemistry between Renner and Seinfeld, I think. So, but what do you guys think?
I agree. I think they work really well together. It was cool seeing her as like she idolized Hawkeye that's what inspired her to be what she was, and for her to carry that through, and then to, start to see more of the layers and dimensions of who she was actually idolizing. And that really like came through on the show. I thought was really cool.
Yeah, I don't think my initial thoughts with Kate Bishop went away. I did in the beginning think of her as kind of bratty and spoiled. And I think I still had like that mindset with her throughout the series. But I think like once I accepted the fact that like that's how her character is supposed to be, I kind of enjoyed it a little bit better. Like the interactions like she had with Yelena, and how Kate Bishop's just like really determined to get what she wants, no matter I guess like the consequences. Like she didn't think things through. I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, that's something I expect from the character. And so, like I said, once I think I understood and accepted her personality, I was able to enjoy her more.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, Porfirio. Like, I warmed up to her character over time. I thought she was all right in the beginning, but yeah, kind of bratty. I was the one kind of getting herself into a lot of trouble in the first couple episodes, but like in the second half, I do think she really does like kind of come into her own.
Right on. Okay, good stuff. So yeah, I think we can get into some of the negatives now. And I was alluding to it earlier, but I felt parts of the show got a little bit like unrealistic, I guess I could say. That season finale kind of went overboard. It just seemed kind of cartoonish and a little bit out of place in a world where it's non-superpowered people, and it was just a little ridiculous. Now, we haven't talked about Kingpin a whole lot, but there's a scene where Kate Bishop and Kingpin fight, and it's pretty wild because the Kingpin in that scene, I think he gets shot with an arrow, and then he takes an explosion, and then he gets like hit by a car or something. Like, okay, again, we're talking about non-super powered individuals. Kingpin is in this camp, he's big and strong, but he does not have superpowers. Like, basically, he should have died in this episode, but he didn't. So
Did
yeah.
he?
What's that, Rainier?
Remember how they, or did he? Remember how they cut away and you hear a gunshot?
Oh, right. It was not entirely clear, right? So
He's not dead.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But what
Like
I'm driving
Henry
at,
said.
yeah, it got really ridiculous. So there's that. We've kind of talked about that, how like the tone of the show kind of made stuff like that a little more acceptable. But a little bit more on the Kingpin character. I thought, in addition to that ridiculous action scene, I thought the Kingpin character was misused here. Like, I thought he's kind of poorly written and was kind of wedged in there. Like, just sort of, we talk about fan service a lot. I felt like the presence of Kingpin, played by Vincent D'Onofrio again, was simply like a fan service move. They were just getting him in there just so he could be in there. And when we initially found out that he's going to be in the show, it was exciting, but I don't think he was used well at all. Now, sometimes when there's like a fan service moment, it's like a cameo, and cameos are kind of safe because they don't really interrupt the narrative of the story. But at the same time, it's just a glimpse, right? And then there are moments when actors actually get screen time and they have dialogue and stuff, and that kind of instance kind of makes me think of Spider-Man No Way Home, where actors like Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina and Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield actually got pretty cool roles. I was expecting them to get cameos, but they actually had like pretty fleshed out characters in the movie, right? So with the Kingpin character here, I felt it was like kind of that gray area in between, where it's more than a cameo, but it wasn't enough to have like any sort of character arc, and it was just sort of, it didn't feel right. It didn't work in the story. Any thoughts about the Kingpin here?
Oh man, you read my mind. I was about to say like everything you just said about
Right
Kingpin.
on. Okay.
Like, because he's such a fan favorite character too. He's
Yeah.
so beloved. We love him, and it's when we see Vincent D'Onofrio and Kingpin, we don't think they're going to do everything that it did with Netflix, but you kind of expect somewhat of the same character, you know? You expect like this hardened badass, you know, who like really took over the city in Daredevil and like crushed a man with his car door, you know? Like this is a badass motherfucker right here. And one of
Yeah.
everyone's favorite villains. And like you're right, he's in there for the worst amount of time. He's not there enough to drive the plot, and he's more than just a cameo. Whereas like if it did either of that, it would have been much better. Kind of if it was just similar to Daredevil's cameo and Spider-Man,
Yeah.
or like Willem Dafoe's character, a character that really drives the plot forward, but he's just there for fan service. And what they do with him is not fan service because all he does is get his ass kicked. Every scene that he's in the final episode is him getting his ass kicked. Like what happens? Vera Farmiga shows up, says, "I'm not going to work with you anymore. I'm like, you've crossed the line and I'm leaving." And he's like, "You can't do that." And she's like, "I'm going to do that." And then she does that. And she walks away, and he talks to Kazi, and it's like, my empire's falling apart. Everyone's betraying me. This like everything is going south. So he talks about how his ass is getting kicked. Then he shows up, and then he gets hit by a car. And then after he gets hit by a car, he gets into this fight with Kate Bishop, where Kate Bishop like hits him with this like grenade arrow, and he takes a big fat explosion, doesn't get anywhere near her. And Big Mob Boss doesn't have a gun on him. And then he
Doesn't
gets
need a gun.
shot. That's what they do with the Kingpin. Like, oh man, like
Yeah.
I'm like getting myself worked up here talking about it, but like here's my hot take. Here's my hot take. Not really a hot take because you just said it, but like Hawkeye takes a big fat steaming shit all over Kingpin, this fan favorite character, and that totally like I don't know. I think that was like one of the moments where I was like, man, I don't like the series.
Mhm.
So,
Well,
Why?
I feel quite the opposite of all of that.
all right,
All
let's
right,
hear it.
let's
I want
hear
to
it.
hear this.
Good rant, Christian, though. Christian,
Thank
good
you.
job. All right, go ahead, Rainier.
I do like. So, I mean, like the Kingpin to me, he was like the villain behind the scenes the entire time because, like, he was the one that was in cahoots with Kate Bishop's mom, right? And the way he's introduced is he's introduced as the uncle. And I think the first time you actually hear his voice, it's just a little hint of a laugh, and then you ask yourself, "Oh, is that who I think it is?" And then it starts to sort of slowly reveal itself until it's caught on that security cam footage that Elena is able to provide, and then he fully shows up in the last episode, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think it made sense in the context of that he was like, I mean, it's his city, right? It's and what Kate Bishop's mom was doing was an investment of his, and that's how he played into it. Um, it made sense to me.
Fair enough.
Like I think yeah, like having Kingpin back in, I was really, really excited for. I think also that episode aired right before No Way Home. So seeing like Kingpin and Daredevil come back into the MCU was really exciting. But I will say, yeah, like his character back in the show was kind of a letdown. It wasn't like the biggest fall for me for the Hawkeye show, but there were just a lot of like what the fuck moments. Like how the hell was Kate Bishop able to handle her own against Kingpin? Like Daredevil barely had his was able to do that, and he has like powers and stuff. And there were just so many moments where I was just like, no, Kingpin would have like crushed her easily, like done this, done this, done this, and Kate Bishop's doing this and this. I'm just like if Kate Bishop couldn't even take down Yelena, like how did she take down Kingpin? So there were just some moments, yeah, and during that final fight scene where I was scratching my head, but I was like, well, this is not the worst it could have been, but at least Kingpin's back, I guess. I was having my little victory.
All right. Okay. Interesting. I think we have differing opinions here, but yeah, I think it's safe to say there are some problems with the Kingpin character. It does bring up an interesting question. Porfirio, you mentioned Kingpin could hold his own against Daredevil. How is Kate Bishop beating his ass? Now, can we consider the Marvel Netflix show canon to the MCU now that the Vincent D'Onofrio Kingpin has appeared on Hawkeye, and that now that the Charlie Cox Daredevil has appeared in No Way Home? Is that all part of this universe now? All that stuff, Defenders, Punisher, all that.
Well, I
Yes
mean,
and
hasn't
no.
Yeah. Yes and no.
I mean, from my take, hasn't like the Netflix show always acknowledged the MCU films? It's just never been the other way around.
Yeah, that's it right there. The Netflix shows have acknowledged the MCU, but it hasn't been the reverse until now, question mark. Like now that Daredevil and Kingpin have showed up, now we know it's officially all connected. Yeah, is that safe to say that? Rainier, you said yes and no. What did you mean by that?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like the MCU has the luxury to pick and choose what they can cherry pick what they want to keep and what they don't want to keep. We've seen that done many times where they can just, erase a mistake by making something else super awesome by leveling it up. But I do want to go back to that question about like how is it that Kate Bishop was able to one up on Kingpin where Daredevil had a really hard time doing so? Sometimes the underdog gets lucky. I mean, that can happen, right?
It can. That's a good point. And she did have a lot of trick arrows up her sleeve, right? So she was equipped.
And also, I mean, like maybe Kingpin was just way underestimating Kate Bishop.
He had a bad night.
Maybe had a little too much of the sauce the night before. Maybe.
Who knows? It's possible. Let's see real quick. There was a character in this show that kind of baffled me. So someone brought his name up, but Kazi, I feel like he kind of got written off the show or something because his character went nowhere. Like, I think the Kingpin character was notably poorly written, but this character was really poorly written too. It seemed like they were setting him up for something and it just led to nothing. And I remember they announced this actor, his name is Fra Fee, and they announced it. He's going to be on the show and he's going to play this guy named Kazi. And it just seemed like they were going to use him for something pretty big, but it just fizzled out. I wonder if a lot of his scenes got left on the cutting room floor or they just cut him out of the script or something. But yeah, it just, I don't know what happened there. It just seemed really weird. Okay. So, oh, let me bring this up too. So we talked a little bit about how the Kingpin was brought in to eliminate Clint Barton, right? So essentially it was Eleanor Bishop, Kate Bishop's mom, who wanted Clint out of the picture for her daughter's sake, right? So she talked to the Kingpin. That part I get, yeah. You know, if you want someone gotten rid of, seems like if you know the Kingpin, he seems to be a good person to go to, right? But here's where it gets hazy. He didn't directly just, do the job himself, and he didn't directly just hire like a hitman or something. Like, it seems like he went to Val, as we saw at the end of the Black Widow movie, and then Val hired Yelena. So we're talking about like Eleanor going to the Kingpin, Kingpin going to Val, then Val going to Yelena. It seems like there are way too many cooks in the kitchen here. Like, doesn't that seem kind of ridiculous? Like, that whole like plot line seems like really muddled, right? Isn't that seem kind of weird to you guys?
Yeah, like it makes you wonder, like, why did Kingpin have to go to Val in the first place when, like, like, I don't know why they had to add that little connection in, or
Yeah.
Kingpin talking to Yelena, excuse me, whatever. But because Yelena, we already know, has this like vendetta against Clint Barton because at the end of Black Widow, Val tells her like, "Oh yeah, Clint Barton killed your sister." And you think it's like, man, that should be enough right there on its own, and you don't really need to loop in the Kingpin there.
Maybe they're trying to
Yeah.
cover the tracks.
It could be, yeah. Like, we
Because
don't know enough about Val right now.
Because everything has to be connected. That's why.
That's the explanation.
True. In the MCU, everything is connected.
I think it's kind of a mistake because I think in the end of Black Widow, they were setting up this direct hire thing. Like, someone hired Val to get a hitman to take out Barton. But in the Hawkeye writer's room, they were like, wait a minute, we have to get Kingpin in here. And they just had to like scramble and come up with this really convoluted plot line. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Henry, you bring up another plot point that for me didn't make sense. Like, and I feel like this is gonna crush your moment, Christian, of how you like that whole closure between Yelena and Hawkeye.
All right.
But I feel like a big plot point was why didn't Yelena just like confront Hawkeye from the very beginning? Just instead of taking like someone's word, like Val's like her word that he was responsible for Black Widow's death. Like he could have just like asked like her ask him like what happened, or he could have like told her what reached out to her and told her what happened. Like it just seems like there was like this like conversation that should have happened earlier but never did. It was more like fight, fight, fight. Why are we fighting? Oh, because you killed my sister. No, I didn't. What? You didn't? Oh, what happened? You know, like that's how I kind of saw it, but you know,
Well,
I
I
think there's a
guess
lot of. I feel like there's a lot of movies where if they just sat down and talked, the movie wouldn't exist.
yeah.
But I think it had. I think a lot of it had to do with just her emotion of it all. Like she was
Mhm.
reacting. That's all she was doing,
True.
and she reacted in the only way she knew how.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You bring up a good
Fights.
point, though.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Christian.
So that makes me wonder, Porfirio, like, like Natasha Romanoff is a very prominent member of the Avengers, these celebrities, and you have to wonder, like, after stopping Thanos, like, wouldn't the Avengers say, like, as a whole, say, like, oh yeah, Natasha Romanoff sacrificed herself to stop Thanos? Like,
How do you announce that though? Like in a press release? Like I don't think they did that.
I guess not, but like, it seems like people are so connected to the events of the Avengers, and like kind of what's going on with them. You'd think it'd almost be like common, like they would have to, or somebody would,
And like the impression I got too was that like no one knew what happened on what's the name of that planet?
Vol
Vor- Vormir or
Vormir.
Vormir, yeah.
like no one knew. Like I mean, as like just a regular New Yorker, would you even believe that existed? Like how would you know? It could be fake news for all they know, you know?
Like it may not be Vormir itself, but I guess like the average person might think, oh, she died in the battle, and that might be enough.
Or maybe a lot of people too are like, well, I know, actually I was gonna say who's Natasha, but her name is memorialized in New York.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a known person. But yeah, a lot of good questions are being brought up. But Porfirio, to address your issue, I think it boils down to fights are a lot more interesting than conversations. Right. So that's why it went down that way.
That's why.
Yeah.
Didn't we bring up in the last podcast like about like Hawkeye like Yelena was never mentioned in the previous MCU films, so it just seems kind of awkward that like out of nowhere Hawkeye's like, yeah, she talked about you all the time and she really loved you and everything. Where we're just like, really? We've never heard it. Like,
Right. Exactly.
They spent a lot of time in Budapest together, right? Like they've got to talk about something.
Right. So yeah, that part I get, when Barton says to Yelena, oh, she used to talk about you all the time. I believe that, in Budapest, I'm sure they talked about little sister and all that. But the fact that we have never heard about this person seems a bit odd. Clint Barton's been in a whole lot of Marvel Studios movies, and we've seen him talk to Natasha Romanoff a lot, and there's been no mention at all of any kind of family, right? Oh yeah, there's that one scene in Endgame where the Avengers are talking after Natasha has died, right?
mhm.
And then the question comes up of, did she have any family? And Cap says, yeah, us. No mention of Yelena, right? You would think at that point, Clint Barton would be like, oh, actually, he got this little sister who she really loves. We should talk to her. We should let her know, right? Didn't come up at all. What the hell?
And she has two parents
Yeah.
that are not her parents.
Yeah, not real parents, but parents in a way.
Maybe
And
the context of the sister talk was when they were kids. Maybe he didn't know she was alive.
That's a good point.
oh, that Natasha never
I mean,
told
like
Clint that she was still a living
like in what
person.
context did he talk about? Did she talk about her sister? Right? Like it could have been in the past, and it's just like maybe the question was never brought up. Oh, is your sister still around? And maybe he just assumed that his sister was gone.
Oh, I like that.
Well, that could have been cool clarification in the show. Like him be surprised, like Yelena's alive. What?
Right. Oh, that's right. That's a good point on your end. That when Jeremy Renner finds out about Yelena on the show, if he thought she was dead, then he would have acted surprised, right? But he wasn't surprised. It's like he knew she was around. I don't know. There's a lot of little plot holes going on here, it seems.
Or maybe Bart knew. Didn't they have like a sour relationship at one point though, Natasha and Yelena? And maybe out of respect, he didn't want to like pull her into it.
I mean, I guess all of this is possible off screen.
Maybe,
but,
I don't know.
It does bring up a lot of questions, like we've been talking about, for sure.
But trick arrows, right?
But yeah, trick arrows. Woohoo! Okay, so yeah, I think this is actually kind of driving home the point we've been talking about. The more you dig into it, the less sense the show makes logically. But if you just take it as kind of a fun holiday feel good sort of thing, then I think you'll have fun with it, like a lot of us did. Okay, any other kind of random thoughts? Maybe we can start talking about like what's next. They haven't announced the season 2, but this is the MCU we're talking about here. So some, perhaps many of these characters that we've seen on the show will resurface subsequently. What do you think is next for these characters? Any thoughts?
Well, I don't know what they're gonna do with Hawkeye, but Kate Bishop, it's based off like the Disney Plus shows. It's just really obvious that it's totally leading up to a Young Avengers team up eventually.
It sure seems like it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I really want to see more of Yelena and Kate Bishop. Like, I felt like the macaroni scene was like them testing the waters of it. Like, I think a show of like just those two would work really well if they did a Hawkeye season 2, or a Black Widow movie with Yelena.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a Black Widow 2 starring Yelena, Florence Pugh, would be awesome. I'd be totally down. Now, maybe a more complicated question is, would you want to see a Hawkeye season 2? Or would you rather see the characters in this show just sort of like disperse and end up elsewhere?
Well, I I don't think I'd be down for a season 2, but I know they're making a spin-off. They're giving Echo her own TV Disney Plus show.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. So that's kind of in line with what I'm talking about, like the characters sort of dispersing and popping up in other stuff. Yeah, and maybe this sort of brings up a bigger question about where do these Disney Plus shows go? Like there are so many of them. We have a whole bunch more coming out this year, next year. There's no end in sight. So they can't do a season 2 for all of them, right? We know they're doing it for Loki, but that's the only one that's been officially announced. So it seems like a lot of these shows will not continue on with season 2s. Some of them may continue with movies. It seems like Falcon and Winter Soldier will like lead into a fourth Captain America movie. Yeah, I don't know. Like, what do you think? Where do you think these shows are going? Like, what's like? It seems like the movies, there's like a pretty logical follow up with sequels or like team up movies, but with these shows, it's a little less clear. Any thoughts there?
I'm wondering if like Secret Invasion or Armor Wars, um, like one of the shows that don't have like a specific like hero title, like Hawkeye, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Loki. I wonder if those are essentially going to be like event or like big crossover shows, and they're going to try to do that the same way they've kind of structured the like you have the singular movies and then you have the big team up movie, and like they're gonna lead into some sort of like street level type event similar to what they did with like the Defenders, where you have like they seem to be building up something with the character Val, and how she's picking up people like USA Agent, Yelena
Mm,
Belova.
mhm.
You know, she might go out and reach Kate Bishop, you know, and she might have some like her Dark Avengers or her some sort of team that she's building to take on maybe like a street level foe, or maybe they'll do something that could be more Kingpin, and they'll follow up what they're gonna do with Kingpin, because of course he's not dead.
Right. Yeah. Good take. Yeah,
They're
I could see that happening. Definitely.
they're making the Thunderbolts.
Ooh, yeah, that could be where they're going with all of that.
Oh, is that a official thing, Porfirio?
No, no, just my
Oh,
guess.
oh, but they could be.
They
It
could
could
be.
be.
Well, yeah,
You
Anything's
heard it
possible
first.
now.
the
Uh-huh.
rumors I've heard about Val's team has mostly been either Dark Avengers or Thunderbolts. So it's very possible that Thunderbolts could be it. Yeah, we'll see.
Wait a
Okay.
second.
Go ahead, Ringer.
So in all of that, no one here is clamoring for a feature length version of Roger the musical, Hamilton
I
style on Disney Plus. Because
I
I sure
loved
am.
that. That was amazing.
Oh, I wanted to like it.
Ooh, a little split decision here. Now that there is a post-credit scene of like a bunch of this musical, right? At the end of Hawkeye, episode 6, right?
There it is.
Right.
Mhm.
So I'm with you, Porfirio. I didn't care for it. Like, I mean, I'm not big on musicals in the first place, but I was also expecting to get, you know, a classic MCU post-credit scene, maybe see a new character, maybe get a little tease about where Kate Bishop or Yelena is going to be in the future, but instead we get a musical number.
I just thought it was hilarious.
I enjoyed it.
All right. Oh, this episode we got here has been pretty divisive on a number of levels. I like it. I like it.
Do you guys know on the timeline, did this happen before No Way Home or after?
Good question.
Because I know in the beginning of No Way Home, the musical was hinted that it was coming up on Broadway. But then like
Yes.
the biggest thing that stood out for me was like the the Christmas tree was still up because that hadn't been knocked down by Hawkeye and Kate Bishop yet.
Bingo. That's it right
Uh-huh.
there. So yeah, you see a sign for Rogers the Musical at the beginning of No Way Home, right? And you see that Christmas tree at the end of No Way Home, and no, it had not been knocked down. So by that logic, Hawkeye ended after No Way Home ended, right? That sound
So that
about
means
right?
I think so. So does that mean Hawkeye doesn't know Spider-Man or his identity?
Oh, I guess not.
Or maybe at the beginning of the season he did, and at the end he didn't. It's possible, right?
Well, what are like college admissions usually? It's been a while since I've had to do this, but like
Ooh.
when you're like applying for colleges, is that like a fall thing? Like is that something you do in like around like September, October of like your senior year?
Yeah, that's something you do. Yeah, I think November is the deadline. And then
Yeah.
like and then early of the years when you get like your responses.
And that fits into the timeline of No Way Home, where MJ and Ned found out they got in, and then afterward, Peter gets his apartment, sews up a new suit, and then we see him swinging around, and it's like winter in New York City, right? So that sounds about right to me.
Would it have been more probable for Spider-Man to show up at the ice skating rink instead of having a big arrow battle?
I don't think there was anything more ludicrous than that bow and arrow battle at the ice skating rink, but that's just me. Yeah.
Where was
Spider-Man showing up would have been par for the course, I think, in silliness. Okay, hey, real quick, just a kind of a random thought, something you brought up, Rainier. You mentioned how all this Marvel Studio stuff kind of has like a similar feel to it. There's like a formula to it. Yeah, maybe we can talk about that a little bit. A lot of people who champion Marvel and the MCU would maybe disagree, and they would say, "Oh, each movie is a different genre, and the shows have a different feel." But yeah, do you guys think there is a Marvel formula, and do you think they're kind of just packaging the same thing in a different way each time? It's really at its core the same thing we're getting over and over and over again, and maybe it's getting a little old and tired. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, like the format, I mean, okay, there's a lot of like, I feel like there's a lot of recurring themes that happen in all the Marvel movies. And like just the first thing right off the bat is like, obviously at the end of the movie, you're expecting an end credit scene, right? And then it got to a point where like, oh, there's a post credit scene and an end credit scene. So now that's like the expectation, right? And then like also cameos of other Avengers showing up in a series or a film, like, that's almost become an expectation as well. Like there's little things like that, I think. And that speaks to like some of that formula, I feel like.
Yeah. Like I think there definitely is like a formula going on. Especially I guess this might be more with the movies. I think it's easier to kind of pick out than some of the Disney Plus shows because they're longer and then it's like a bit of a different format. There is like a sense of like a general like I'm gonna say the word sameness in like tone, color palette, feel. Sameness sounds like a bad word, but like I don't mean that as a bad word because that's kind of what makes everything feel
Like
like it
consistency,
takes.
right? That's what you're getting
Yeah,
at.
consistency
Consistency. Yeah.
is more the word I'm looking for here. So, uh, it and that's kind of what makes it feel like you're in a connected universe. And that's kind of what contributes to this singular vision. But there are some like kind of story tropes and like that you do see a lot, and I think a Marvel movie, and I think you do see a lot in Hawkeye as well. Um, and like I think like what's always the same complaint about every Marvel movie you always hear? It's the villain was like kind of wasn't all that well thought out. But but on the flip side, you spend a lot of time with a really great main character that you like latch onto. You always latch on to Hawkeye, you latch on to Iron Man, you latch on to Captain America, whereas the Tracksuit Mafia in Hawkeye, the Ironmonger in Iron Man, and the Red Skull in Captain America all felt like they fell a little short of what you know of especially from the comics from some of these characters. And like it definitely like you have action that is fun and full of big set pieces, but generally falls into a very like light PG-13 tone. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Where it's definitely meant to be a little more family oriented. Um, and like I guess for personally for me this year, I think you're hinted you talked about a bit of a Marvel fatigue. I think I do feel that. Like I love Marvel. I love everything that we've been getting this year, and it's been a lot of fun, and that consistency is there. But I do notice that I feel like there's a bit of some cracks showing, like with the way we talked about Shang-Chi in like its final act, how it felt like it had to have this big action set piece that was full of CGI when we already had these amazing action sequences full of tight hand-to-hand combat in the first couple acts that we just didn't really get of in the next season or in the next segment. He fights a big dragon instead. And we mentioned like being a little checked out because it was too CGI heavy. And while Hawkeye doesn't have that specifically of like too much CGI, it does have that like it feels like each one does have this like problem with the endings. Like I've been seeing a lot of problems with the endings with Marvel stuff lately. Minus Spider-Man though, because that was fucking awesome ending.
True, true.
What are the problems with endings? Like, can you cite anything specific? I'm kind of curious what your thought is on that.
Okay, so like let's see. Do you mean like Hawkeye specifically or just in general?
Just in general.
Okay, so I think like it's weird how like it's kind of hard for me to pick out like I guess something too specific, but it feels like a lot of endings they have to throw in a big battle to like kind of kick off. They want a big climactic set piece to really to end the story on a big bang, you know. They you really want and you really want to use make it as big as possible to up the stakes. Um whereas I think what makes some of the best Marvel endings are actually some of the more small ones that kind of condense things a little bit. Um, because whereas like I felt like the big final battle was a little too cheesy, and it kind of loses a bit of its focus because you have the big goofy arrow battle against a bunch of guns, whereas takes Spider-Man No Way Home. Although you did have the big battle versus all the villains, the big final battle and the thing you want to see is what happens when Tom Holland's Peter fights the Green Goblin on the shield. And you have this one-on-one battle and you remember the other Peter Parker catching the glider, saving Tom Holland from a much darker moment. Or like in Loki, how you just have the singular room and you have this very long conversation with Kang the Conqueror. And then you have the two Lokis fighting. But with Shang-Chi, I have no real like connection to this big dragon that pops out at the end of the movie. You have the big connection with Shang-Chi and his father in the battle, but the father dies before the biggest action set piece comes, which is the big dragon. And you already know the hero is going to come out um, is going to come out alive, but you want a big finale that changes the hero or almost changes the hero, similar to what happened in Spider-Man and Loki. You want something big and climactic. And I think with like I said, it kind of also connects to a weak villain because if you have a weak villain and you shove a bunch of CG and stuff in there to kind of cover it up, it just makes it feel bloated in a way. Um, do you, does that like I guess like answer the question? Do you see where I'm going with it?
I see where you're going with it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that does recur in a lot of the MCU movies.
Yeah. Like, what do you guys think about that? Is that is that just my rambling, or do you guys see what I'm getting at here?
No, that's a really good summation. And I would add to it, there's actually kind of a like a like a phrase for it. It's the Marvel's trope of giant things falling out of the sky. Like so many of the movies end that way, and the shows are kind of following suit in kind of a different way, but they all kind of end in that similar way. And I've found throughout Marvel Studios movies that very often the better action scenes are earlier, like in Shang-Chi, the Muni bus fight is so much better than the dragon battle at the end. Or like in Winter Soldier, the urban warfare battle in the middle of the movie is a hell of a lot better than the helicarrier scene at the end of the movie. Or like, I don't know, like Black Panther, that scene in Korea when they're fighting at the casino is like so awesome, but the final like T'Challa versus Killmonger at the end was kind of like, it was okay. It just time and again, we're seeing like better action scenes earlier in the movie because they feel this need to have this giant CGI spectacle at the end. And yeah, I think there is something to that Marvel formula where maybe the producers are like, well, this is working, people love it, so let's just keep giving it to the audience, right? So maybe something needs to change there.
You make a good point, Christian, about how like some of the cracks are kind of starting to show itself. Like I do feel like I see that, and I think you guys are driving that point home that like there is a lot of repackaging that seems to be happening, and we're seeing that because we're seeing like a span of a ton of films over a long period of time. I don't know. I find it more interesting when they challenge that formula and they break the mold. That's the stuff that speaks out to me more, I feel like.
Yeah, you wonder if they are truly going to try to challenge that mold because it has worked so well, right? Maybe they'll just take the stance of, well, let other people do it. Maybe more reason for superhero movie fans to go check out stuff like the Suicide Squad and R-rated superhero movies and just completely different types of content, right? Because there are things that Marvel Studios just cannot do. It's a Disney property and they need to maintain this connected universe like we've been saying, and there has to be this flow. It has to be kind of similar. I think it's built in, in a way. It just, they have to do it. There's no other choice. Okay, so Porfirio, any thoughts? You've been a little quiet on this particular subject. Any thoughts on the Marvel formula?
No, I'm just pretty much agreeing with all you guys. Like, like every Marvel project is pretty much like the same thing, just like repackaged and in different forms. Like, I want to say like, like WandaVision, like didn't follow the same formula of like the whole like battle action scenes, but even that one, like the finale was the whole like epic confrontation between Agatha and Scarlet Witch. So still falls in that same formula, but like I think, I don't know, like the only other company I could think of that like makes it kind of different, like DC with like, the Joker movie, or like even I feel like kind of like the Snyder Cut, like when there's like different ways to tell a superhero story, just makes it more refreshing. But Marvel just kind of like repackages the stuff in the same way.
Yeah. And just to close out this topic on more of a positive note, I think the way Marvel has repackaged this is expertly done. It could be worse, right? Like look at Star Wars movies. Like Star Wars movies at their most frequent came out every other year. Every other year. The MCU cranks out like 3 movies a year. And with the Star Wars movies, people were feeling Star Wars fatigue. That was a thing, right? And this is every other year. With Marvel movies, we're talking 3 movies a year, and people are barely getting sick of it, right? It wasn't until maybe 2021 where we got like tons of content where maybe we're getting a little bit of that fatigue set in. But I think it could be worse, right? I think Kevin Feige has done a really good job in kind of doing this repackaging thing. Yes, it kind of is the same thing over and over, but I think they've done a good job keeping it fresh when they can.
That's an interesting point that you make about Star Wars. I think the reason why Star Wars fatigue sets in more is because you're watching a very linear storyline. Like you can't say, oh man, the second one is completely different. I loved it more than the first one. It's like you either love it or you hate it. And it's just like the moment you're on the hate train, you're not going to like the entire thing.
Yeah.
Whereas Marvel, you have different character movies, right? Like you can love one and hate the other. I think you have there's more flexibility there.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about 9 movies, episode 1 through 9. Essentially, it's all about the Skywalker family, right? So they're kind of stuck, in that narrow tunnel there, right? So if they can open things up, they should, because the MCU has had a bit of a formula, but it's not like all 20 plus movies dealt with like the Stark family, right? It's been a lot more than that.
I think that's why The Mandalorian was so refreshing, was because it's something new.
Yes, agreed. Okay, so why don't we get to our ratings? How would you rate Hawkeye on a scale of 1 to 5? How about Rainier? Why don't you give us your rating for this show?
I will give it a 5, just because I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. And sort of following up on that, I'm going to go 4 out of 5. I enjoyed it a lot. And I think, Rainier, you probably had a similar feel that I had. It came out during the holiday season. It took place in the holiday season, in the show. And it just had that feel to it, it had that holiday movie vibe to it, heartwarming and lighthearted, a lot of comedy. I think if I was 100% honest with myself, I may go lower than a 4 if I watched it again, maybe during the summer or something.
Well, it is a holiday movie, right? You can bring it back up next Christmas.
Oh yeah, there you go. Maybe I'll do that. But yeah, seeing it during the holidays and, during COVID, I mean, that's another good point of context, right? We're all going through a pretty challenging situation, right? And to see something like this at that time was like exactly what I needed, and I felt really good about it. I can't go full 5 out of 5 just because of all the defects that I noted earlier. But I really enjoyed this show a lot. So 4 out of 5. What about you, Christian?
All right.
What do you think about Hawkeye?
So I guess I'll give the dissenting opinion. I know I'm definitely like, this is not the like most popular opinion of like the fact that I wasn't a big fan of this one, but I am very glad that a lot of people have like really latched onto this, and I'm glad that I'm largely wrong about this show, because it's good to see this character really get his time in the limelight and to really get his day. And I think you guys are right with the vibes are like on point for like the Christmas feel, the fun, and like a lot of that comfort. And I think that is a lot of what we need right now. Um, Even if it wasn't what I was personally looking for at this time in my life. And like, so great vibes, a lot of fun, but I think on the negatives is that like I think the story's just kind of a mess, and like I think it's just a lot of it just didn't click for me, even if there's a lot of things, individual things or characters that I really liked. Um, so it's a 2 out of 5, but I would still definitely recommend this show, especially if you've been watching all of the Disney Marvel shows here and that, up to this point. It's worth your time.
Wow, a 2. We might have to nickname you the Grinch. Because
I know, right?
The
This
Grinch
wasn't
of the
what I
hell,
was
dude.
looking for. Fun and
Right.
comfort. This is awful. Where's my grim, dark Batman show? Why do I gotta wait till March? Why can't it come now?
Oh, I can't wait for that. I cannot wait for that movie.
It's gonna be
Yeah.
so good. Oh man.
All right. So on to you, Porfirio. How would you rate Hawkeye?
Like I came into this movie like with little to no expectation, and I think because of that mindset, like it just blew me away. Like what you guys have been saying, good comfort during the holidays, really fun, good vibes with all the characters. Just the biggest downside was not the best return for the Kingpin, but other than that, I enjoyed it. I would give it a 4 out of 5. Really, one of my favorite shows that stood out to me for 2021.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that is worth mentioning. Just the timing of it all, like during the holiday season. And I think I had mentioned this in a previous episode, but the combination of No Way Home and Hawkeye just gave me some serious like good vibes, good Marvel vibes to end the year on. So yeah, it was a year where we got a ton of new Marvel content, and I didn't think it was all great. So seeing some really great like crowd pleaser type material like No Way Home and yes, Hawkeye, I thought it was a really great way to end a very challenging 2021. And with that, we can wrap up the episode. This is Farewell from Porfirio, Rainier, Christian, and Henry.
The thing too, like it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, like what you're getting, you're gonna get what you expect, right? But like at the same time, it's just like, do we want to see like these repackaged like storylines? Like, come on, give us something new.
It's almost like when I watch like Marvel, there's like a certain expectation of like it's gonna be like this. These things are gonna happen. It's gonna end this way.
Yeah.
And I go to Marvel for comfort. And when I'm like, I want to see something weird, crazy, and different, I'll go to DC, to kind of fill that in. Like, okay, I want to see like a Martin Scorsese tribute movie. Oh, hey, here's Joker. I want to see
I
a
mean-
4-hour movie. Oh, there's Justice League.
I've been meaning to ask
But
you
it's
guys,
like,
like
I'm gonna chill out. Let's watch some Marvel. Yeah.